Hello, everyone. Welcome into another episode of Bull Breakdowns here on the Guilty as Charged podcast YouTube channel. As always, we are talking about the draft and the Chargers. This will be the last episode before the draft next week, where we are officially under a week out from. Brought in someone who's been doing a lot of great draft coverage over at The Ringer. He does the play sheet, where he's been doing a lot of great film breakdowns. Philly special. He's been doing all the draft stuff, mock drafts, everything over at The Ringer. Ben Solak, how are you doing today?
I'm well. Thanks for having me on, Alex.
Yeah, we had Ben on a couple years ago, so thought we would bring him back for final draft thoughts and wrap up. I guess now that we are less than a week away, what is your gut feeling on how those first four picks will play out and ultimately the position the Chargers will be in?
Yeah, gut feeling is Caleb 1, May 2, Daniels 3, Marvin Harrison 4. That's gut. If you made me bet right now, like with the information we have, I'd probably still lean Jaden Daniels at 2 over May, but it's tight. I think it's been tight the entire time. We're just kind of now starting to realize just how close it is there at 2 overall. And then I think 3 for the Patriots. I think they're stay for sure. I think one of Drake or Jaden will be there for them, and they'll take that player. And then the Cardinals, man, like, I don't know. If the Cardinals had a Godfather offer for 4, I think they would have taken it by now, right? If the Vikings were giving you this year's first and the other this year's first and the next year's first, and you would have just taken the deal, and then you can start to figure out what you're going to do with those picks. The fact that they haven't yet leads me to believe that they feel just fine and dandy staying at 4 and drafting Marvin Harrison. Rightfully so. They have extra picks already. Like, they don't need to be trading back. They need blue chippers. And so I don't think that's a bad approach by them. So I do think it's 3 QBs and then Harrison, and then that leaves you at 5. Harbaugh can take J.J. McCarthy, his favorite quarterback in the
class. Yeah. So when it comes to 4, that is kind of the most interesting spot for me, just because I agree with you that at some point, you have to turn those picks into blue chippers, and, you can trade down as many times as you want and acquire those extra assets, which may not be bad in this draft. But if you have the chance to take Marvin Harrison Jr., I ultimately think you have to. I guess I'll follow up that question with if the pick there then is the Chargers have the quarterback slot, which they can then, trade out to another team or stay at 5, what would you do?
I mean, so all of it depends on deals, right? Like, we're never going to be able to say, this, that, or the other thing. I'm inclined to trade back. I think that it's always important to understand what stage your team is at in terms of their recovery, right? For the Chargers who are looking to rebuild this thing, they spent a lot of cash on a lot of players, right? I mean, like Tom Telesco and Brandon Staley aggressively attacked what they believe, like Justin Herbert's rookie contract window, what they believe to be a winning opportunity. Now, obviously, the plane didn't land. There's a ton of different reasons why. We can talk about those, but the plane didn't land. And so you're at a point now with the Chargers where you're eating a ton of dead cap on Keenan. You're going to be eating dead cap on Khalil Mack and Bosa. Obviously, they're still on the team, but they're costing you a lot of money, and they will cost you a lot of money when you inevitably move on from those guys and herald in the new era, the new personnel of Chargers football. The biggest advantage you can have right now as you start this rebuild, at this stage in the Chargers rebuild, is just a bunch of cheap players who can play. Like, they don't even need to be that good. Like, obviously, it'd be great if they're good. That'd be huge. But just like if you can get like a defensive tackle starter in the 3rd round, like, that's awesome. And the best way to get a defensive tackle starter in the 3rd round is to have 3 picks in the 3rd round, because you're just 3 times as likely. And so the Chargers, to me, are a trade back team relative to like the Cardinals, who do already have some of that extra capital, right? Talk about some of the other teams in the top, like the Bears, for example. So the Bears trade back from 9. I mean, they can, but like the Bears have a pretty solid roster overall. They need blue chippers, right? Cardinals need blue chippers. They need like those elite guys that are only available at 4, at 5, at 7, at 8. Whereas the Chargers, like, certainly they need those guys, but they need depth first. They need a functional play first. They need to turn over this roster. So I'm inclined to trade back at 5 if it goes QB, wide receiver, and have somebody come beat the Giants at 6 for J.J. McCarthy. I think you can get a big haul for that. You can get future first for that. Like, that's serious stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think they probably get the Minnesota package, or like you said, if the Giants have to beat a package and they want the quarterback, then you get a serious package there too. I guess the interesting scenario here, you mentioned the Cardinals, and like it feels like they are maybe more leaning towards ultimately taking Marv. I guess, how would you kind of weigh the different scenarios? Because there's one obviously where Marv is there and then you have the chance to still trade down out of that pick, versus its neighbors and alt and like a lot of those guys there versus trading down. Would that make a difference for you if I make you Chargers GM in that scenario?
A bit, not too much. A bit, absolutely. It's hard to say no to Marvin Harrison Jr. It's a good football player. I like Rome Odunze a lot, and neighbors. I've wide receiver 3, and I have my issues with him, but he's still an excellent player, and he's a lot of what the Chargers have needed over the last few years in terms of that speed, right, that explosiveness. And so I do still have a lot of options, right, and I have all the tackle options, and I do have a need at right tackle, and so for the Chargers, man, Marv moves the needle a little bit, but not too much. I still lean trade back. The deal's got to be right. You know what I'm saying? You know, Joe Ortiz here, like this is grown man GMing in year one, right? The Chargers can get like a Texans caliber leap, right? If they handle this draft correctly, or they can get a Cardinals caliber leap, where it's like either they're doing it in this year's draft or they're doing it in next year's draft. Like that is available to them because they hold a very premium pick. So Marv moves it a little bit, not too much.
What has been your experience, I guess, watching all three of those top tier receivers who the Chargers will, potentially have the option to take, and what do you kind of make of this wide receiver class in general? I know you did an episode of the Play Sheet specifically focused on Marv.
Yeah, I got Marv 1. I have Rome Odunze 2. I have Malik Neighbors 3. All of those guys going top 5, top 10 doesn't hassle me too much, right? Like I think they all warrant that. Neighbors, like I said, I'm a little bit suspicious of. Just like played a lot of his time in the slot. It doesn't like contact a lot. So like you just have to be willing to play him in a role a little bit more specifically than you have to play with Marvin or Odunze. I think you put Marvin or Odunze on any given team on any given Sunday, they could produce for you. I think Neighbors is a little bit more. We got to get him his touches, got to get him to his buckets. But at the same time, like 4-3-5 is 4-3-5. You want a guy who you need to get to his spots because he's such a game breaker with the ball in his hands. He's so good down the field. So it's not too much of a problem. It's just why I have him third. Odunze, I think, is going to be. I think Odunze is going to make all pro teams. I think he's going to be in the league for 12 years. I think that Marv is going to make all pro teams. Marv has, I think, some of the more unique potential because the frame is so big and he's such a good route runner. Like there's some universes in which like Marv is just never covered. Like he'll just go seasons just not being covered, and you're going to have to put doubles to him. Like he's that ceiling of player. But there's so many different ways to make wide receiver work. That's the important thing to remember because people like to bring up like, oh, Justin Jefferson went so late, and like Monroe St. Brown 4th round, CeeDee Lamb went late in the 1st round. There's like DK Metcalf, AJ Brown 2nd round picks, Puka Nacua 5th round pick. There's so many guys. There's so many examples of late. Brandon Ayuk later picks working. Why is that? It's not that the top of the class is bad. It's not that we're not good at figuring out who the best receivers are. We a lot of the guys who get drafted early are very, very good. It's that there's so many ways for wide receiver to be successful. There's so many body types that work. There's so many roles that work, and there's so much opportunity because teams are passing the football so much. And so no matter who you take, you stay at 5, take Marv, stay at 5, take Malik, stay at 5, take Rome. Doesn't matter. Take somebody at 78, and then take somebody at 127. I'm making up numbers. I don't know what the chart.
Yeah.
But bring multiple guys into the building. Throw a lot of darts at wide receiver. And the previous regime, Quinn Johnson in the 1st round, and then Darius Davis in the 6th, the Josh Plum in the 3rd round, they've thrown their darts. They weren't successful, but you got to keep doing it. You have to keep throwing those darts because at wide receiver, like you're going to eventually hit on a guy. And with the way that veterans get paid contract-wise, that rookie contract is going to be an advantage for you.
Yeah, I was thinking, honestly, Cooper Kupp gets brought up every year because now he's the example of like, oh, we can wait until, the later rounds to hit on a receiver, kind of like you mentioned. And he went into a scenario where, sorry, did I say Cooper Kupp? I meant Puka Nacua.
Nacua, yeah. Same. It's the same story for both of them. It really is.
Same story for both of them. But, he came into a scenario where Cooper Kupp was injured, and that Rams team obviously was, way over the cap and basically had to be reset from, fuck them picks mode and into accepting that they had to then build through the draft. And so that was sort of where the opportunity kind of opened up for him, where the Rams needed that presence at receiver when Kupp was hurt. So I think, like you said, it's just about getting those dart throws and sticking them, like you said. So I wouldn't be surprised that the Chargers ultimately took 2 wide receivers in this draft, especially if they were to trade back and multiply their picks, kind of like you mentioned earlier. Specifically, about Marv, I think sometimes we use the term NFL ready, and it's almost like that does him a disservice because I don't think that quite encapsulates just, how good he is in terms of, the subtleties of his routes and all that. I think we kind of underrate him in that way, or just because it becomes, so boring in draft coverage to talk about how good he is, maybe. So yeah, I do think Marv, if he's there, makes a difference for me a little bit, but it depends on, obviously, like you said, are the Chargers viewing this as a 1-year thing or a 2-year thing? And then Neighbors, I think, like you mentioned, might be a little bit slot heavy early in terms of his usage before he kind of gets to like learn, sort of how to be pressed and get more familiar with those situations. But also, like, they traded Keenan, who's not playing in the slot anyway anymore. So it's like if he's there and they were to ultimately take him, I don't mind that either. And then obviously you have Odunze, who is definitely the more polished, probably outside of Marv, the highest floor prospect in this class. I wanted to get into, you were asked kind of on Twitter the other day, sort of your day 2, day 3 sleepers, if we wanted to get into that territory now, and guys that you think could be fits for the Chargers. You specifically mentioned Max Melton, who went to my alma mater at Rutgers. So he go Rutgers. He's a big player, a fan I'm a big player of. So what do you kind of think about, I guess, his fit, and then who are some of your other day 2 sleepers, day 3 guys?
Yeah, Max Melton is just the example of like, all right, like I wanted to bring him on my team, and if he fails at outside corner, I have to play him in the nickel, whatever. I'm still starting him, right? Like the fifth defensive back is playing 60% of my snaps. That's significant on the defensive side of the ball, where like edge rushers are rotating, defensive tackles are rotating. Like 60% of snaps clears the bar for a meaningful pick. And if Melton's a career nickel, that's what he is. If he can also play on the outside, then the number can get higher than that. So Melton is a very likable dude, and this is a really good class for nickels. Him, Andrew Phillips out of Kentucky, Jarvis Brownlee, Ennis Rakestraw, Louisville, and Mizzou. But Melton's my favorite of the bunch. Mikey Sanders out of Michigan. I like Sanders a little bit more, but Melton's really, really good. Right. So I do think Melton's a start in the league. I think you're going to see him carve a role for himself and be around for a long time. So he's one of my guys, day 2. I'm a Cole Bishop guy out of Utah. I think that he's one of the better safeties in the class. I think he's probably just a box player permanently, but I think he's a really good box player. I like a Marshawn Nealand, edge rusher out of Western Michigan, local for me. But he's a big, powerful, long. It's not an edge class that I like very much. So if I have a guy with developmental traits that interest me, I'm willing to take him pretty high. So I like him. Same thing true of the defensive tackle class. Do not like a lot of the day 2, day 3 guys. I think it's a pretty thin class for that group. But Michael Hall out of Ohio State, a little bowling ball, a little quick penetration player. They need one of those in Los Angeles. And so I think that he's a fit for what LA wants to do. Nealand's good because you have to start getting ready for the non-Bosa, non-Mac world, right? Like you have to anticipate that those guys are not long-term for the roster, and you want to start buffing up edge rusher a little bit. And then day 2 at tackle is elite, right? Like, I mean, this tackle class is unbelievable. And so if you're passing on tackle in the first round, which I think they can take a guy and that's justifiable, but if they pass, and they're going in round 2, and you're getting a Kingsley Sumatai out of BYU, getting a Jordan Morgan out of Arizona, Kieran Amadije out of Yale. He's a great prospect, a great grip profile. Rosengarten, the Washington guy, he play right side for you. He play right side of Washington. He's probably a little more of a guard, but you can kick him on the right side if you want. There's so many dudes, and so they're day 2 is a great day. If they're going for right tackle, then that's the spot.
Yeah, you mentioned this tackle class, and obviously some of the guys that could go day 2, day 3. We obviously have heard a lot about potentially the Chargers wanting a tackle to build out the trenches, maybe even on day 1, whether that is at 5. And if it ends up being Joe Alt over Marver Neighbors, I'm going to have to calm a lot of people down and bring some Chargers fans, to their senses a little bit. And then there's obviously the trade back guys, where you talk about the Chargers spending a ton of time with J.C. Latham, who they spent time with at his pro day, and then Troy Fautanu out of Washington. A lot of trade back guys in this class if they were to go to that 11 spot. Go into the tackle class a bit for me, I guess, with some of these first round guys, and maybe if the Chargers were to go in that direction in the first round, kind of what they can expect out of some of those players.
Yeah, so you have clear round 1 players. And Joe Alt out of Notre Dame, Olu Fashanu out of Penn State, Troy Fautanu out of Washington, Talise Fuaga out of Oregon State, J.C. Latham, who's Alabama, Amarius Mims, who's Georgia. And if you want to throw Graham Barton, who played tackle at Duke, probably kicking inside and lead. If you want to throw him in there, you do too. That's 7 names. And all of those guys might be going to the top 24 picks. Like, that's what we're talking about in terms of this class. All right, so the talent at the top, I mean, it is rife. It is unbelievable how good of a tackle group we've got this year. It's going to save the league, man. I'm kidding. It's going to save pass protection. It's going to be amazing. For the Chargers specifically, I think Alt out of Notre Dame is the consensus top tackle. He's a lights out prospect. He's high floor, but he's also high ceiling. He was a high school tight end. He just recently put on all this weight. He just recently came in this position. So he's still got some growing to do. I think when he gets a little bit better with his hands and sees rush moves a little bit better, there's a very, very high ceiling on Joel. He isn't like, oh, sleepy, good tackle, take the guy, take your Wheaties, your vegetables. No, he's for real. Like this is like a highly impact player to be a franchise cornerstone for you. With that said, would not surprise me if the Chargers prefer Talise Fuaga out of Oregon State overall. And the reason is because, A, they need a right side player, not a left side player. And Alt might be able to switch it, but we know that Fuaga played on the right side at Oregon State, did so with a lot of success. And that's really where their need is because they have Rashawn Slater on the left side. But also, B, if we're talking Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman, and some of the play style and disposition that they look for on the offensive line, where they want to run the football and they want to run it gap power, right? Just displace defensive linemen, create big running lanes for backs. That's where Fuaga is the strongest. Fuaga is a tricky player to talk about because of the top guys, everybody is a better pass blocker than run blocker, except for one dude, and that's Fuaga, right? And there's some people talking about moving Fuaga to guard because of just how dominant he is, moving forward, moving vertically, displacing bodies, creating rushing lanes. And so if the Chargers are sitting there looking at their board and they say, man, Fuaga fits what we like and he plays on the right side, like he's the player for us, you don't need to take him at 5 and probably move back a little bit. Like we talked about, they might trade down. But it would not surprise me if they're hunting tackle, that they pass up on Alt and pass up on Olu Fashanu and even maybe J.C. Latham. Though Latham would be good for them too. Latham, I think, has played on the right side if memory serves. And they pass up on some of those top guys for the elite run blocker in Talise Fuaga on the right side. That wouldn't surprise me from the Chargers at all.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how you value that position-wise, right? Because you mentioned if he were to be at right tackle, but there's talk about kicking him, Fuaga, into guard maybe later on in his career, whether that's year one or sometime later down the road. How do you think about that from a, I guess, contractual standpoint? Kind of like we mentioned maybe with Melton, which is a different scenario where, okay, if he fails outside, then, we can just put him at nickel corner. We can put him at slot, where those guys are just really valuable still. You have to have a really good nickel corner versus, if I'm getting a guard as opposed to a tackle, that might be, a turnoff, maybe not specifically for the Chargers, but for some teams, depending on where they have him graded, which I guess is going to make it interesting to see kind of where Fuaga winds up going compared to a Fashanu or like an Alt or those guys who are kind of like set at being your specifically tackle.
Yeah, so a lot of it is team specific, right? I think like guiding principles, tackle is more valuable than guard. But again, if you're going to be a team that really runs the football, right, and you're going to dedicate yourself on being a team that has an elite front and can dominate in the trenches, then you got to care more about guard. When you look at also some of the teams that have invested recently in the guard position, right? The Panthers just gave Robert Hunt $20 million a year. It's not to sneeze at. And a big part of the reason why is because they have a shorter quarterback. You need to have really good interior protection. You need to be able to keep his feet clean, keep the air in front of him clean, so that way he can work the middle of the field. So they're going to invest in guard more than another team might. So it's always team specific. So for the Chargers, we're a little bit extrapolating because we're saying, okay, here's what Harbaugh did in the early 2010s, and he was with the Niners. Here's what he did at Michigan, but that's college, and so there's some differences. We're always trying to extrapolate. For the Chargers, I do think that with the state of where the roster's at right now, I don't think that I think that you'd like for Jamari Saylor and Zion Johnson to be your starting guards of the future. I don't think you're convinced of either one just yet. There's reasons to be positive about both. Do not get me wrong, but I don't think either one is like, yep, for sure. I do think that getting a guy with some positional versatility is a good idea because you can then just mix and match. You can patch up some holes, solve some problems. Maybe you draft Fuaga saying if we have to put him into right guard, we will, if it makes the most sense for our team. And then he starts at right tackle day one, he never moves because he's elite. Great. Who cares? If you need a right tackle, you draft him to be right tackle, cool. Maybe you do play him at guard and then he ends up being elite there. If you think about like the Dallas Cowboys right now, the Cowboys drafted Tyler Smith out of Tulsa to be a left tackle heir apparent to Tyron Smith, their longtime franchise left tackle. Then they played Tyler Smith at left guard because he was just one of their best 5 linemen and they needed a left guard. And he was insane. He was so good. He was like all pro caliber left guard. Now Tyron Smith is gone and they have a problem, which is that they need to figure out, okay, do we need to draft a left tackle? Do we need to draft a guard and then move him to tackle? But it's a way better problem to have than the problem of, man, I wonder if Tyler Smith's good enough to replace Tyron Smith. Like, no, they already solved that problem. And so having mix and match could be nice when you're at a stage like the Chargers are at, where they're in a bit of a team transition. Like you just want to get good dudes into the building. So I think that they will value positional versatility a little bit and the ability to switch positions. but I don't think they feel like it's something they have to go hunt, right? You need good players in the building. So if there's a guy who's a good left guard for you, and he's only ever going to be a left guard, go get him, right? And figure it out later.
Yeah, you start to look at the Our Lads depth chart, and it's like, all right, well, we don't necessarily have the right to be picky with this roster right now in terms of, just getting talent in the building, kind of like you said. I wanted to ask, because we obviously don't talk a lot about quarterback on this channel in relation to the draft because we have Herbert, so why are we going to talk about the quarterbacks? But I did want to ask you, because you have done great breakdowns over at the Play Sheet with Caleb Williams and all of the top 4, guys that are expected to go in that range. Why, in your mind, do you think there is this, huge variance between, I guess, what people have, 2 through 4 after Caleb Williams, where now Drake May debates start, JJ McCarthy, and, some people seeing his ceiling, and then kind of where Daniels falls into that. Why do you think there is so much, I guess, kind of like the 2021 class almost, where you had Lawrence at the top, and then everyone was kind of like debating where do you put, Wilson, where do you put Fields, where do you put Lance, and sort of all those guys. I feel like this is kind of a similar version of that, where Caleb's been consensus number 1 forever, and now you have people closer to the draft debating what the Commanders should do. What do you think is kind of the reason for the variance in the 2 through 4 guys?
Yeah, they're all good, right? And so that's what creates your debates, is that like there's ways to talk yourself in all 3 of these guys. It's always so challenging because I'm known as, like, on our pod and in the Ringer universe, like, being like anti Jaden Daniels and a little bit anti McCarthy as well. And it's not like I like both players. It's just, do I want to take them at 2? Do I want to take them at 4?
Right.
Probably not. Like, I'd like to be able to get them a little bit later, and that's just the quarterback tax. It's always hard to swallow. Jaden Daniels and Drake May both suffer from inconsistency. They're both mercurial players. Snap to snap, they can give you some really, really, really nice reps, and then they can give you some really tough reps. So you can see what you want to see, right? Because if you want to see the bad stuff, you can see the bad. If you want to see the good stuff, you can see the good. Weighing the good and the bad, just how good is the good? Does it outweigh the bad? How much of the bad has to come as a result of the play style that allows them to play good? Like, these are challenging things. Like, a lot of May's bad plays are the result of aggressiveness. Well, also a lot of May's best plays are the result of aggressiveness. So do you want to really take that out of him? Versus Jaden Daniels, so like a lot of his bad plays are like freaking out under pressure, right, and kind of short-circuiting a little bit. And his good plays aren't really the plays where he's under pressure, and so like this is something that we'd actually like to be able to like fix. Like, can we get this out of his game, right? So you have that conversation. McCarthy is less mercurial. He's less to high ups and low downs. He's extremely inexperienced, right? And he did not have to throw the ball a ton at Michigan. He did not have to throw on losing game scripts. Oftentimes when he was throwing with a lead or on 1st and 10 or in a position where it seemed like, like they were going to run the football or they couldn't. It gives you advantageous matchups. And so he's a tough nut to crack in that regard. You have age question marks. McCarthy is super young, so he's got developmental tracks ahead of him. Daniels is super old and only started to dominate once he turned 23, once he was a few years older than the guys that he was facing. Also, while he was playing with 2 top 20 picks, an NFL wide receiver and a future star NFL left tackle as well. It's coming out next year. McCarthy is playing with Michigan, where like every single dude on that offense is going to get drafted at some point, which is a full team of NFLers. Drake May was playing with nobody. No, right. Tez Walker from that team's getting drafted, and that's it. And I don't even know how high Tez Walker's going to go. Like, there's enough inconsistency, enough red flags, enough uncertainty around the 3 that you can poke holes in anyone that you like. And then you put the best 25 plays of each one. You're like, yeah, it's a future NFL quarterback. So they're all good, and that's what creates the opportunities for debate.
Right. Yeah. And like you mentioned, there's more people who probably are, watching Jaden Daniels via, watching Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas film than those watching some of the, other UNC players on that roster to watch Drake May. So I think that they're, you can kind of see what you want to see. And, those guys have different playmakers on offense for sure. I'll get you out on this. What do you think ultimately, what are kind of the, maybe 3 rapid fire things you're most excited to see in this first round coming up?
All right. I think, number 1 is where the quarterbacks land. In particular, I'm really interested to see who goes to the Patriots. I think that New England's got a shot here to like land the right guy and just springboard into the next 15 years of Patriots football under Jerome Mayo and like new front office there. What are they going to prioritize? The Patriots are fascinating to me because they're the biggest unknown in the draft. So I'd say that's number 1. I'm interested to see how that goes. Very interested to see how the defensive class gets drafted. Not a good defensive class. Couple good corners, edge rushers. They're kind of mid. Byron Murphy's the only defensive tackle out of Texas anybody's really excited about, apparently. And so, like, we did most of the draft process being like, Jared Verse is going to go 7. And now Jared Verse might go like 24. Like Byron Murphy apparently might be the first defensive player off the board. And like no one was there 3 months ago. So the defensive class is a weird one. It's a tricky one. And then I think like some of the big trade up stuff is exciting. I'm suspicious of a lot of it. Like, oh, Chris Ballard might do an aggressive trade up. Yeah, right. I know Chris Ballard. He's not gonna do that. But maybe Sean Payton and the Broncos. Like everybody keeps saying nothing's off the table for them. Like they're calling about stuff. I think that like seeing the Broncos go like hog wild all in Sean Payton, like that to me feels like I can talk myself into that. So the idea of that, the idea of Buffalo getting impressed for a receiver, like I think it's a very trade heavy first round for sure. It's a weird class. It's very wide receiver and off the tackle heavy. It's very defensive player light. It's good through like 25, and then it really drops off. It's a very weird class. And so I think we're going to see a trade heavy first round.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see if Buffalo ends up doing that, Julio Jones style trade, or shoot up the boards and do something crazy. I'll get you out finally on this. Everyone has stopped watching the show, so we can talk about what we want to talk about. Is it finally the year for our Sixers?
Yeah, absolutely. Don't worry about it. Sixers in 6. They're going to beat the Knicks in 5. I do Eastern Conference Finals. I just want to get past the second round. After that,
that's the goal.
Obviously, I will if they get there. But for now, that's what I'm telling myself. Let's get into a conference finals, like a real grown-up team, please.
Fresh off the Nico Batum game. All right. Thank you for coming on, Ben. Excited for the draft next week and love all the work you do with The Ringer. So let the people know what you got going on.
Yeah, we are Ringer NFL Draft Shows, where all of our NFL Draft podcasts are going to live. So make sure you subscribe. We're going to have shows coming up through the week. We have a live show in Detroit that we're going to be at. So if you're in Detroit and you want to come hang out, you should. Ringer NFL Draft Guide, which is nfldraft.theringer.com. So where all the scouting reports live, quarterback charting lives, mock drafts lives, where all of our team grades will live. Come hang out. It's a blast.
All right. Thank you, Ben.
Cool. I appreciate you.